everyone, I'm Lisbeth Vargas, one of the guides of this awesome YouTube channel, and today I will guide you through Caribbean literature, which we usually do. But we're unraveling one of the region's most defining themes, colonialism and identity. From exploring the scars of colonial rule to celebrating resistance and cultural reclamation, Caribbean authors have crafted works that are as complex as the history that inspired them. We'll also look beyond colonialism to discover other themes including family, migration, and hybridity that define this remarkable body of literature. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Colonialism left an inerasable mark on the Caribbean. Between the 15th and 19th centuries, European powers divided these islands for plantation economies, enslaving millions from Africa. This exploitation didn't just devastate economies and societies, it fractured cultural identities. But Caribbean literature reclaims those stories, turning pain into poetry and prose that resonates worldwide. An excellent example is George Lamming's The Pleasures of Exile. As highlighted in the Routledge Reader in Caribbean Literature, the book that we so often use for this YouTube channel, don't blame us, it's just an awesome book. Lamming delves into how the colonial systems alienated the West Indian psyche. So it caused a deep dislocation and yearning for a rooted identity. This longing is a common theme across the many Caribbean
For centuries, education in the Caribbean was defined by colonial curricula. Students were taught European classics like Wordsworth's Daffodils, poems filled with unfamiliar landscapes and values. Lamming and others argue that this imposed culture silenced indigenous and African voices in favor of a civilizing mission. But as Caribbean authors gained their platforms, they questioned these norms and reclaimed their histories.
Colonialism wasn't just a national experience, it also shaped personal identities. For example, let's talk about Jean Rhys's White Sargasso Sea. In this masterpiece, it is reframed the story of Bertha Mason from Jane Eyre. So Rhys, a white Creole from Dominica, uses Bertha as a symbol of marginalization, exploring the psychological toll that cultural hybridity can have on a person. So in the Routledge letter, her work stands out as a pioneering narrative addressing colonialism through the lens of gender and madness. But Caribbean literature isn't only about reflecting colonial rules. It's also about resistance. Cultural resistance is beautifully demonstrated through language. As Kamau Brathwaite famously argued, nation language became a tool to reclaim identity. So Creole languages, once dismissed as
Brathwaite's
broken,
essays in the Routledge Reader detail how language represents the spirit of Caribbean identity. Creole reflects the lived experiences of the people, celebrating diversity over imposed colonial perfection. This shows that storytelling isn't just an art, it's a form of activism.
Now, while colonialism is central, Caribbean literature covers a broad range of themes, not just colonialism. So, migration and family dynamics, for instance, feature prominently. Take Jamaica Kincaid's Annie John. In this coming-of-age story, Kincaid uses the strained relationship between a mother and a daughter to reflect tensions between Caribbean identity and the British imposed systems that they're suffering from.
Kincaid masterfully layers themes of alienation and love, offering universal truths through a Caribbean lens. This is a recurring motif in regional literature, the personal reflecting the political, the individual reflecting the collective.
A young black woman in New York, I didn't understand American race. I didn't understand racism at all. So I just sort of launched into things. You can't possibly have any idea of my beginnings, as a teenage immigrant in America, living with a white family in a white part of a suburb, and having no idea other than bitterness and shame at being taken out of my home and sent away. And the shame of it was that my mother didn't love me. I was very ashamed of that. Which she would deny, but I think it's fair to say that she didn't love me. Anyone who loved you wouldn't do that. And well, of course, she would say, well, look at how it all turned out for the best. But I quickly tell her, you can't take credit for this. This is something I did on my own.
Hybridity is perhaps the most defining characteristics of Caribbean literature. The region is a cultural mosaic. African, European, Asian, and indigenous influences intersect here. This diversity shapes not just identity, but storytelling. It gives rise to what the Routledge Reader book describes as a syncretic model of cultural definition.
In Derek Walcott's poetry, hybridity often manifests as a tug-of-war between European literary traditions and Caribbean landscapes. This blend doesn't dilute identity. Instead, it amplifies it, creating what Walcott calls a mongrel literature, a fusion both rooted in the local and expansive in its universality.
Why is this important today? Caribbean literature gives us a lens to discuss global themes, migration, systemic inequalities, and cultural resilience. It reminds us that identity is layered and history cannot be erased. But it can be rewritten, reimagined, and reclaimed. These stories invite us to understand a past rooted in struggle, but always pointing toward hope. This is something that we must not forget. This is what our ancestors lived through. Guys, thank you so much for joining me on this literary journey. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment down below. Tell me, which Caribbean authors resonate with you the most? I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Hasta luego and keep reading!